Welcome to Psychologist Talks. Today I'm going to be taking on the topic of quiet quitting, which, let me pause and note, I know has been discussed well over a year, so I am late to the game. But it keeps floating around, and that kind of frustrates me. Well, not that it floats around, it keeps being misunderstood. It's kind of been appropriated incorrectly, and so I just want to speak to that real quickly. So the notion of quiet quitting, the quiet quitting that makes sense, and I should note, quiet quitting is just a phrase that we have created for something that has existed for decades and decades and decades. If not before cataloged history, quiet quitting has been around. So let me be very clear. It's just a phrase that captures a sentiment right now, but for a phenomenon that is part of human nature. So quiet quitting, as I understand it, and a very healthy version of it is, essentially, if I had to kind of talk through it, is why would I give 110% if no one is willing to give me 100%, never mind even 90% back? Why should I, work myself to death for a system, for a cause, for people who don't legitimately care about me or my future? Now, I hope if I say it like that, most anybody listening or viewing this would go, yeah, that wouldn't make a lot of sense. Now, there's some clarifications in here. One of the misunderstandings, I think, is so if people don't treat you with respect, or if people aren't giving you what you want, then you have every right to work 50% effort, or maybe 75% effort at most. So you can just not do your job. And even if it influences, an unknowing consumer unduly negatively, well, high five, stick it to the man who cares. And this is a really cynical and pessimistic view on people and youth. Let's just be honest. This is kind of ageism at play here. I know some people believe ageism only goes up, but let's be real here. This has been going on for a while for younger generations. We're always really critical of younger generations because they're changing and doing their own thing. That's nothing new. But I feel like these past few decades, it's just been brutal. Just a lot of anger and straight up hatred of the younger generation. And it's just super uncalled for because that's not what they're doing. Now, I'll pause again and say, let's remember the normal curve. If you're unfamiliar with statistics, it says that most people fall in the 50th percentile. And as you work, kind of standard deviations are an easy way to think of it. Think of the 25th percentile is going to 75, going down to 25. Most people will fall in the middle of that normal curve. You'll have your outliers. And your outliers are indeed people who just don't care. They're not motivated, they're self-centered, whatever it might be. You get more of that as you get to one pole. On the other pole, you have, when we're thinking about work ideologies, you have people who literally are working themselves to death. And even employers who they're not the best employers will sometimes look at these people and go you need to slow down. Universally, people are hold on. It's just unbridled anxiety on that end of the fence. And neither one is terribly healthy. But you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater just because the normal curve exists. Most people, most youth, most millennials and below, anybody who's used this word quiet quitting is not quitting just for quitting's sake. They have their methodology of tiering how invested they're going to be. This is just a phrase that captures, if we had to boil it down, motivation and rationale and sort of, not even just rationale, but sentiments about working, which we've always had. And so what this really boils down to is, one, it's a question of what motivates people. And truly, with challenging times, the context within which this phrase came up, very challenging times, where access through money is really challenging. it has been for several decades. This is a culmination of multiple decades of a gradual decline in equity in our society, in our ecosystem, or economy. There we go. And so this is just the culmination of that. There's a lot of nihilism out there. What's the point? World's burning around me, and that's demotivating, even if you're at an awesome job. I work with people who are demotivated and depressed and anxious. Like it saps people independent of employment. But then what happens if you're working for an employer who doesn't care about you? Like fundamentally does not care about you, doesn't incentivize anything that you do. They just expect you not just to show up, but to show up and give 110% despite their indifference, then despite anything, no rationale whatsoever. Back in the day, that might have flew. That might have been okay, because at least if you had a crappy boss who wouldn't give you much, your money took you somewhere. So you could at least put forth effort and make sure you don't get fired by a crappy boss just to get the paycheck, because you get things in life. Now you don't even have that? Then what is motivating people? That's question one. Question two is, if you're concerned about a quiet quitter, or you're concerned about this notion and you're a leader, the first thing you should be looking at is you. There we go. That's a little more aggressive though, pointing out. And that's like, how do you care about employees? How do you care about people? Now, I'm in the mental health profession, so I have to be careful when I say this, but my nature of leading and interfacing with people, whether I'm a leader or teaching or whatever it might be, is I'm giving 110% for their sake. I'm always going to give people 110% unless they give me reason to not do that. That's kind of the nature of what I do. I will assume that. And that's because I also have power and privilege. When I have that, I should give 110%. I shouldn't wait for someone with less power who is coming and paying me for something to show whether or not I'm going to put forth effort. I'm going to put forth that effort outright. And just doing that alone, people will often reciprocate that effort. Not 100% of the time. Again, normal curve exists for a reason. You're going to have demotivated, self-centered people, whatever. But most of the time, just by putting forth that effort towards someone else, they're going to put that effort back towards me. That I don't stop there, though, because that doesn't take it all the way. Not everybody is going to respond solely to wow, they're putting a lot of effort in me. They're also looking out for themselves, and that is totally normal. That's like basic psychology. Remember what I said, when you'd have a crappy boss in the past, and it wasn't like, well, I'm getting nothing out of this, I'm just going to keep trying even though they're beating me up. There was still a reward. There was still something egocentric, like I can still get something out of this. It still applies to this day. Anyway, I lost my train of thought here, but I will invest in people relationally. I want to know about them and what makes them tick and their opinions. Doesn't mean I'm going to listen to all of them. Doesn't mean I can put them in positions of power. I've never been in a position to pay people, but doesn't mean I'd give them a 20 grand raise and bankrupt myself just because they're putting in 110%. But I will give back relationally, and I will give back with respect, and I will give back with opportunity. I can't, guarantee any position, but what would it be like if you develop this? I'm like, I can help you on that. I hear you're really passionate about this. Maybe we can do this to help you out with that passion. And when you invest in people like that, even in the present day, regardless of generation, I promise you 20 years from now this will be true, people will give you at least 90, if not 100%, if not very regularly 110% back. Because you're respecting people. You're respecting what they think. You're respecting what they want. You're respecting their effort. And when you do that, people will not, most of the time, quit on you. They won't. They will not. That's a basic fundamental fact. And there is nothing. I guarantee you, if you did a multi-million-dollar study on quiet quitting, you will not find phenomenal leaders and phenomenal systems with a mass of a younger generation quiet quitting on them. You will not find it. I would bet my life on that. You will not find it. Will there be a sliver? Of course. There's always the sliver. It's always been there. You go into any team, there's always a straggler or two. They're just phoning it in. Any environment, there's always somebody phoning it in. Just like there's somebody who's always trying to be in control, and they're calm the heck down. That's the normal curve. Most of the time, they're going to give you what you put in. Now, what I said earlier, though, is we do have to tend to society at large, though. It's really a challenging time to want to give 100%, even when you have really healthy leaders, really healthy systems, or the thing I didn't mention too, a really important cause. Like, I will always give 100% because in my line of work, if I'm giving less than 100% to people just because I've got a bad boss, that's a horrible thing. Or, if somebody's in customer service and you got a horrible boss, doesn't mean you can be mean to a customer, right? Like, let's have some morals and principles here. But yeah, that's not the notion of quiet quitting. That's just speaking to like individuals here. But we really do have to grapple with as a society this sense of nihilism. Like, what's the point? What's the greater point? And yeah, I mean, it's just so many things feel like they're burning, and so many things feel like they're out of people's hands of power. Like, they don't have a voice, they don't have momentum in their life. And that's what really is going to start eroding on society if we don't figure that out. If we don't figure out how to, come back to a common sense of truth, common sense of respect for all people, and stop trying to bar and isolate and just disenfranchise people and, trade hands of power sort of stuff. Like, we got to find a way back from the brink here. I don't know what precisely that looks like, but that to me is the greater danger. Like, if there is any danger of the misunderstood quiet quitting, the quote unquote, like, I'm going to quit just because you're not rewarding me enough and I'm a spoiled brat. And even that's not right, because that's not what I'm talking about. Like, I'm just going to quit just to quit. The only real risk to that is nihilism. And that is not, I do not blame the younger generation for grappling with, holy cow, how am I existing? Like, what is this? What is happening? It's just kind of a messed up time. And I think there's a call to action for us as a society to kind of figure out where have we gone wrong over these last several decades, because we've been steering this ship towards an iceberg for a while. And the younger generation has just been on board and without any control, and they're just sitting there going, are we going to crash into these icebergs? And us older generations are like, yeah, I guess we are, because we can't figure out who's actually going to steer the ship or how to collectively steer it together. And so that's the one little caveat I will give is I imagine it is tough. Me growing up in the 80s and 90s, they weren't the best of times, but they also weren't like it is now. And so I had that privilege before things started hitting the fan in the 2000s. So anyway, I know this has been talked about quite a bit, this whole notion of quiet quitting, but that's to me how I would define it and how I would normalize it. Like, we need to stop doing this whole stereotyping, just kind of projection crap, especially for the younger generation. They don't deserve that. Do they have their growing edges? Yeah, so did I, and so did you if you're of an older generation. We all did. But this notion of quiet quitting, held responsibly, is actually a really important dilemma and a really important challenge to the system of how we treat workers and take care of workers, and then how we lead effectively and wield power effectively. That is a noble call to action, and we need to take that seriously. So, as ever, thank you for watching and or listening, and stay curious.